funny thing happened on the way to publishing episode 32. We couldn't. Literally couldn't. I finished at 3 o'clock in the morning putting it together. Kind of a struggle this time. They usually come pretty easily. It was kind of a struggle. Then this morning when Beth hit the word publish to send it out to the world, if you will, it didn't go. Error. She tries again. Error. She tells me that, and she says, should I try a third time? I said, yeah, this may mean something. Try a third time. She starts all over and publish. Error. Okay. I was praying a rosary at the time, and that became my prayer of, if that's not it, what is? And I was taken to last Friday. I started thinking about Friday. I spoke to an organization called LifeWorks. It's a pro-life group. And there I talked about how in the midst of the miraculous waking me up and putting me on the same page with God, and the idea is to share the mind of God, right? We're supposed to think like God. Isn't that what we're supposed to be doing here? My opinion doesn't matter. God's opinion matters, and I'm supposed to be in alignment with that, sharing the mind of God. And when it comes to life, does anyone think they're arguing in heaven over life? Does anyone think the Holy Trinity is split on the abortion issue? Does anyone think there are pockets of people up there going, God's great, but he's got this whole life thing. He's out of his bird on this kind of stuff. Does anybody think that? No, they all share the mind of God. So here we are down here, Christians, supposedly sharing the mind of God, aren't we? Our opinion doesn't matter, only his opinion matters, and we're split 50-50 on life. So somebody's got it wrong. True? I mean, I used to think that it was merciful. We weren't in a culture of death. We were in a culture of mercy. Mercy for the woman who finds herself pregnant, and it's merciful for that woman, and merciful for the unborn, too, because who wants to be brought into a world where they're not being loved right from the get-go? So we're being merciful to the unborn by killing it, and we're being merciful to the woman who's pregnant, and we're merciful to the people who want to please help me die, and mercy killing and all of that, and euthanasia, and so we're being merciful. This is not a culture of death. It's a culture of mercy. That's where my mind was. I could rationalize or wrap my mind around that, but somewhere through the miraculous, all these things in my own personal life, waking me up, I found myself on the other side of this. And I thought, can this be duplicated, was my message to the group. Can it be duplicated if we bring more people, if we make more people aware of what God's doing in the world, and more people aware that our opinion doesn't matter, only his opinion matters? Don't we, then it's not 50-50 anymore, is it? Other people need to be awakened as well, because, again, does anyone have any doubt about how God feels about life? I mean, he etched into stone the words, thou shalt not kill. That's pretty obvious where he stands on it, isn't it? Or when his people were starving and complaining, what did he do? He threw food on them every day for 40 years, manna from heaven. That's a nice, strong statement about how he feels about life. Or when his son raised the dead and healed the sick, that's a pretty strong statement. And my point about everything we do is touched by heaven, and when I go out and talk, is that everything that was going on 2,000 years ago and before by God is still going on today. He's still healing people. He's still offering his divine interventions. He's still sending his angels to us. Nothing's changed, absolutely nothing. And through that process, I find myself here trying to think like God in all issues. So we're on election day here. And you voted or you didn't vote, and many, 50-50, rationalized the whole thing about, well, yeah, I know that candidate's pro-choice, pro-abortion, but that's not the only issue in a candidate. and I wonder if God doesn't say it isn't. Is there something more important than that one? So, and as I say this, you're going through a process right now, whether just to turn this off now or to listen to what else I said at LifeWorks. We're supposed to think like he does. My opinion doesn't, your opinion doesn't matter. Sorry, your opinion doesn't matter. What does he think about everything? And life is one of those things, right? So I'm going to play part of the talk for you just to kind of demonstrate once again this process of waking people up and bringing them to the same page with God, waking them up enough to at least start thinking about issues and thinking about the prospect of striving to think like God, of once again sharing the mind of God. This year, these people are telling me stories about their encounters that are so remarkable, way beyond mine. Example, Maria Manna. She lives in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. She tells me the story about how 18 years ago, she's over at the man who will become her husband. His name is Chris. She's over at his house. They're sitting on the couch. They're going to watch Jeopardy. Upstairs is his 11-year-old son and her dog. And the dog's barking up a storm, so Chris turns up the TV a little bit. Okay, next to the TV is this giant palm tree, 6-foot tall palm tree in a 3-foot wide pot, 150 pounds, big, tall, sturdy thing's been sitting there for years in Chris's house. Dog's barking, turns up the TV a little bit more, they're watching, when suddenly, no rhyme, no reason, this palm tree just falls over, pot and all, everything, over, dirt's flying, they jump up. What is that? How is that even possible? And what's with the dog? And they go shooting upstairs, and the father goes into the room, and as his son is committing suicide, he walks in. 11-year-old boy. He has a bathrobe belt around his neck, double knotted. Chris begins screaming, the father, and starts tearing it off of him, trying to get him off, and yelling at him and shaking him. He finally gets the robe belt off of him. And he's shaking and he's slapping. Come on, come on. He's unconscious. He's purple. He's not breathing. Come on. Finally, the boy takes a breath. He lives. He's still alive today. Later that night, Chris says to Maria, if the tree doesn't fall over, my son's dead. God did that. I know God did that. Maria, you need to find us a church. We got to start going to church. And where's that cross necklace you gave me? Where's that? She finds the cross necklace. He puts it on. He doesn't take it off. 18 years. He does not take that cross necklace off. Again, the flare gun, the encounter, the miraculous, shaking him up. Who is that? What is that? Figuring it out. And then getting in line, getting on the same page with God and a relationship, bringing him over here again. A woman by the name of Karen Riddle lives in Sydney, Australia. She tells me this story. It happened 5 years ago. She was not a believer. She and her husband were not believers and didn't care. She's walking home. She's walking down the street. She's on the left side of the road, and she sees on the right side of the road coming her way 3 men carrying something big and bulky. It's heavy. It's covered in a sheet. She doesn't know what it is, and it's just kind of weird looking, but they're walking this way. She's walking that way. And she's walking and she says, this has never happened before. It hasn't happened since. But she says, I'm walking along and I hear a voice, an inner voice in me. I hear this inner voice say to me, when they drop it, make sure you look the other way. And she's, what? When they drop it, make sure you look the other way. Do you understand? Yeah, I understand. And there's about a 2-minute walk before they're going to cross paths here. And this angel, I'm going to say angel, keeps saying, make sure, I know. And then the angel starts lightening up a little bit, starts having fun with her. The encounter gets a little lighter. He starts joking with her. He starts singing, make sure you look the other way. I mean, she's just amazed what's going on, and she's loving it. She's loving this encounter, whatever this is, but make sure you look the other way. Okay, now these guys are getting close. And the voice, the angel, says to her, okay, I'm going away now. You're not going to hear me again. Okay. When they drop it, just make sure you look the other way. Okay. Sure enough, bam, she looks over here. She continues walking forward, but she's looking over here, like the sound came from over here. After an appropriate amount of time, she is looking straight and continues on her walk. When she hears from over here, one of the guys say, no, it's okay, man. She looked the other way. And she looks over. There was a guy coming for her and has now turned around and gone back. Obviously, they dropped it. The sheet fell off. It was exposed. Oh, no, did anybody see what it was? Her. And then one of the guys was watching her and said, no, I saw her. She looked the other way. He used the exact words that the angel said. Make sure you look the other way. So the guy, something bad was going to happen there. That encounter would not have been nice. Whatever that guy was heading over to do, that was not going to end well, and you know it. So she continues walking on, and she thanks the voice, which isn't there anymore, and she puts it together. She just starts putting it together. The encounter, the flare gun, the what was that, all of a sudden thinking, was that a God thing? Was that a God thing? Last year, she and her husband became baptized in the church, starting with that flare gun. Amen. Amen. God is doing this all the time, these collisions of heaven and earth. That one to me sounds like a modern day Lot's wife story, doesn't it? Except Lot's wife looked, and pillar of salt and all that. And if you keep reading the story, you find out that Mr. Lot and the kids then dragged her to their new home where she provided seasoning for the rest of their lives. Who knew? You didn't read that? They then purchased a pillar of pepper and put them on the table. Pass the salt and pepper. I don't think so. In 2006, I was standing in the parking lot of Joe's Deli in Rocky River. I was being interviewed by Channel 5. The reporter's name was Lisa Ciccolone. She was bawling her eyes out. She could barely ask the questions. The cameraman was Jimmy Lentz. He too was emotional. He told me later that day was the day his faith finally came together and clicked. Both of them had seen a miracle that day that dazzled them. That miracle story was going to lead the 6 o'clock newscast that night, to the point where Monday morning, I then called the general manager, news director of Channel 5, John Butte, and said, why was that your lead story? Why was that your top story, 6 o'clock Friday? And he said, Friday? He said, there was no more powerful story in Cleveland, Ohio on Friday than the miracle of Sarah. Sarah was a junior at St. Joseph Academy High School. She had developed what's called Evans tumor. She was only the 20th person ever diagnosed with Evans tumor, only the 4th in which it was malignant. It was in her shoulder, about the size of a football. And the problem with Evans tumor is that it just crawls itself in, around, and through the muscle so that you have to cut it out. So she was down at MD Anderson in Houston. The surgery was going to take 12 to 14 hours. They had 5, 6 doctors. This was going to be pretty ugly. The rehab was going to be horrible. But the fear was if we don't get this thing out of here, it's going to get into her lungs and kill her. So the principal of St. Joseph calls Kathy Namey, wife of Dr. Isam Namey, some of you know, known as the physician of unshakable faith. He prays, things happen. She calls Kathy and said, would you and your husband come and pray in proxy for Sarah through the girls, the 900 girls here at the school, so that the girls would get a prayer, but also Sarah would get a prayer. So they said, absolutely. So they came over along with Father Bob Welsh of St. Ignatius High School and Sister Monica Marie from Incarnate Word, and this prayer team began praying over the girls, over her classmates, over her fellow soccer players, to faculty, family members, over as many as they could over a 90-minute period of time, while at the same time the surgery is going on. So Sarah's getting prayers, the girls are getting prayers. After 90 minutes, it's over. All the girls are in tears. They're just absolutely in tears. The love that came out of them. I was there kind of as an MC, and it got me. It got me too. So the girls go back to their classes. The Nameys go back in the car to go back to the office. And Jimmy Lentz, the cameraman, just a couple of minutes after all of this, is calling Kathy, saying, you have to come back. Why? What's going on? And meanwhile, Kathy's on the phone she's hearing girls screaming. She's hearing PA announcements. She's going, Jimmy, what's going on? And they said the doctors came out and they're calling it a miracle. They came out of surgery after 90 minutes, same 90 minutes. And they went to the family and told them, we didn't find what we thought we were going to find. We have the Cleveland Clinic scan of this. We know how it was woven in and around and through the muscle. That's not what we found. When we went in there, we found the tumor sitting on top of the muscle. We just had to peel it off. And that miracle led the news that night at 6 o'clock. At the end of the school year, the girls were all asked to write an essay. What was the spiritual highlight of the year? They all wrote the same thing. Those essays ended up on the desk of the bishop, Bishop Pill at that time. All of them said it was the miracle of Sarah. That was the day that we saw it's true. Jesus is still here. He's still walking this earth. He's still performing miracles. Some of the girls had to admit that they were atheists until that day. That was the day they became Christians. That was the day they became believers in Jesus Christ and in the healings that he offers. One of the greatest ahas of my life, is coming to the understanding that that boring God I thought was out there, that same God that was doing all those things we read about and hear about 2,000 years ago, is doing all of that today. He never stopped. Everything he was doing 2,000 years ago, he is doing today. He's healing, he's sending his angels, he's sending his divine interventions. Beth and I went to see an oldies show a few weeks back over in Lorraine at the Palace. let's see, what was it? Grassroots, Marvelettes, Chris Montez, Classic 4, old 60s, some 70s music in there. 2,000 people loving the oldies in there. I mean, and we looked around the room. It was like going to an AARP meeting. I mean, it was just, it was just a sea of walkers and gray. It was just everywhere. It's like, but loving the oldies, loving it. And we were too, just loving it. I've interviewed a lot of musicians through the years, and there's a kind of a common lament, and it's that it's so cool that people still love our music. It's so cool they love the oldies. We just wish they loved our current music too. And I wonder, is God saying that? I'm so thrilled you love the oldies, but I didn't stop 2,000 years ago. I'm still doing this stuff. I'm still doing this stuff. Have you looked around your church lately? Is it beginning to look like an AARP meeting? Where's everybody? Where'd they go? You know what we need? Lone Ranger. Any fellow Lone Ranger fans in the room? When I was a kid, I loved the Lone Ranger. It was the same episode every week. Same episode. It was a Lone Ranger in town, riding into town, doing something heroic, riding out of town, and somebody saying, "Who was that masked man?" And then somebody else saying, which is authentic frontier gibberish for I don't know, but he left a silver bullet. Okay. We have a silver bullet. We have a Lone Ranger. Excuse me, a Lone Rangerette. 1531, Mexico. Juan Diego. He's walking into town, and 4 times this girl that looks to be about 18 years old intercepts him and says, "There should be a church up here." Yeah. And go tell the bishop. And he went and told the bishop doesn't care. Not like our bishop. As long as you fill out the forms. So on the fourth encounter, she says, "Okay, give me your cloak, your tilma." It's called a tilma. His cloak, they're made out of cactus. They last about 30 years. And there were some roses up there, so they put she puts the roses inside his tilma and wraps them up and says, "Take them to the bishop." And she goes and takes him, he goes and takes him to the bishop, unfurls the cloak, and there it is. Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? Our Lady of Guadalupe. That image converted 9 million Aztec pagans who were killing their babies, offering them up to the gods. They were killing their children and offering them up to the gods. Within a few years, they stopped. It all stopped, and they all converted to Christianity. Isn't that amazing? But God wasn't done yet. He wasn't done yet. The silver bullet, the pro-life, pro-church bullet, was to happen over 400 years later. When we got into the 1900s, now we can look scientifically at that cloak, that tilma, and that image. And what do they find when they bring out the technology and the microscopes and all that? What do they find? Well, first of all, here it is almost 500 years later, and that cloak, which should have deteriorated after 30 years, it's perfect. It's like it's brand new. The image itself feels like silk. The image of Our Lady of Guadalupe feels like silk, but you know what? They've never been able to figure out what it is. They don't know what it's made of. It's nothing earthly. They don't know what it's made from. The temperature of Our Lady of Guadalupe is 98.6 degrees. It's like she's alive. The stars she's standing in front of in that image. Well, isn't that interesting? The stars are in the exact position of the constellations that were located on that day, December 12th, 1531. And then they looked into her eyes. Books have been written about the eyes because when they shined a light into her eyes, they constricted. The pupils constricted. Take the light away, dilate. What? Then they looked into the eyes and the image. You know how in a human eye, it's both right side up and upside down. It has to do with the curvature of the eye. Same thing of the image. What's the image? Microscopically, they couldn't see it for over 400 years. In both eyes, the same image. Juan Diego, the bishop, the cloak, the roses, and 12 other people who are in the room looking on is there. How's that for science? God knew where we would be now. He knew 6 people would be leaving the church for every new one coming in. He knew the millennials, baptized millennials. 50% of baptized millennials, when asked, "Are you a Christian?" say no. I follow the beat of my own drum. I am my own moral compass.
Besides, there's no science that proves there's God. Excuse me. I always want to say, anytime someone says that, there's just no science in God, I want to say, would the church please stand up in one voice and say 5 words? Google Our Lady of Guadalupe. Or YouTube Our Lady of Guadalupe. There's some amazing documentaries on YouTube about Our Lady of Guadalupe. You know what? Every faith has its own special flare guns, miraculous moments. Every faith. For you, it might be Fatima, it might be just a favorite of yours, or Our Lady of Guadalupe. Or it might be the miracle of the Holy Fire. Every year, on Orthodox Easter weekend, every year going back to the beginning, fire comes out of the stone that Jesus was laid on in that tomb. Do you know that? Fire comes out of the stone where Jesus was laid every year, guaranteed Orthodox Easter. Maybe your favorite is Eucharistic miracles, where a piece of consecrated bread somehow turns into a piece of human heart, always the left ventricle. Why? That's the part of the heart that pushes the blood. That's the part that keeps you alive. Every time, it's the left ventricle. Every time, it's type AB blood. Wonder whose heart, huh? A few months back, this desire, this push to talk about these big, huge, global flare gun moments, as well as the singular ones, like the ones I shared with you and the families and the individuals. This past summer, I just got this huge push. You need to be talking about this. You need to be talking about this in venues like this, in churches, go wherever it is, just get out there and do this. So I talked to Beth, she said, let's do it. Let's reach out to churches, let's reach out to places that need to know how heaven and earth are colliding now, not just 2,000 years ago. That's what we need to do. And we agreed to do that. But before I could lift a finger, before I reached out to anyone, before we could put together a website, anything, churches started calling me. Catholic churches, Protestant churches, in-state churches, LifeWorks. Vicki Fallen gets a hold of me at the same time. Men's groups in Idaho and a church near Philadelphia. I don't even know who these people are. But somehow they found out about me. And at the moment where I'm about to go, well, we should do it, it's coming in this way. And I'm looking up going, I think you agree? I think that's a sign. And then God did something so amazing. What a sign. Beth and I were having dinner at home. She's fixing dinner. I went over to pour us a glass of wine. And there was a half a bottle of wine over there. And I go over, and it's kind of weird, but the cork, the stopper, the rubber stopper wasn't in it. It's a rubber stopper, and it's got a little flip top so you can pour out of it and everything. And it wasn't in the bottle. Well, I didn't take it out. Beth, did you take it out? I didn't take it out. It was sitting next to the bottle in this tray. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Okay. 2 days later, it's a Sunday. We're coming home from somewhere. We walk into the house, and this time it's Beth who sees the cork, the same cork, on the kitchen floor. Same cork, but it's a different bottle of wine it's not sitting in. There's another bottle of wine now open, and the cork's on the floor. Wine doesn't build up pressure and pop it out. This is weird. 2 days later, our son comes home from Columbus, as Dick mentioned. He's in the film industry. He had done a film down there, and one of his jobs is he was in charge of props. He says, you want to hear about my wine story? You got a wine story? Yeah. He says, 2 of the props were 2 bottles of wine. They were sitting in the trunk. I had them sitting on a pillow to cushion them. A bottle of white and a bottle of red. Well, I went to retrieve the 2 bottles of wine. He opens up the trunk, and they're sitting there in the pillow, and the bottle of white, the cork, has broken the seal, popped completely out, emptying the contents of the wine into the pillow. What? The bottle of red, the cork, has broken the seal, come halfway out, and stopped. Why? In God speak? If this comes out, red wine all over the place, a big mess, and he didn't want us thinking anything negative about this event. This was positive. God had popped 4 corks in 4 wine bottles in 3 days. Is he celebrating something? What is wine? What is wine? Wine is celebratory. You toast beginnings, you toast conclusions, it's family. When I get together with my 6 siblings, somebody always says, is it wine 30 yet? And out comes the wine. What is wine? Wine is celebratory. It's family. It's not beer, is it? And it's not hard liquor. It's wine, fruit of the vine. It's celebrated in Mass. It's different, isn't it? It's different. And God had popped the cork on 4 bottles in 3 days. Was he celebrating something? Yes. He was celebrating a decision, and he was celebrating a message. What's the message? Everything he was doing 2,000 years ago, he is still doing today. Embrace it. Embrace it. Love it. Jump up and down about it. Be glad about it. Share it. Let people know it's a living God. Do you know, in South America, the church is growing. In the Philippines, the church is growing. In Africa, the church is growing. India, the church is growing. We're not growing. Europe's not growing. What do they do differently than we're doing? Embracing the miraculous. Seeing those times when God says, I'm alive, flare a gun, I'm right here, and they talk about it. You know who else talked about it? The early church. Boy, did they talk about it. This is how the church began, isn't it? The miraculous is how the church began. What Jesus did, what the apostles did, this is how it began. This is how it grew, the people being excited by it. Angels, they've got it all. And this is how the church can grow again. And as the church grows, it's only natural that this room refills again, because heaven and earth are colliding every day. Every day the flare gun is going off saying, do you see me? Do you see what I just did there? Do you see how a radio guy found his way from out there, pro-abortion? I didn't care. Now I'm here. Karen Riddle and her husband in Australia didn't care. Now they're on this page. A family in Victoria, British Columbia, their son is alive, and now they're on this side. St. Joe's girls, those girls are what, 28, 29 years old now? Do you think that maybe had an impact on their life and their decisions about life? Because they saw the flare gun. They saw today, the today God. So thrilled we love the oldies, but he didn't die 2,000 years ago and stay dead. And we are to embrace this incredible, magnificent, merciful God. Because as it says, as he was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Embrace him. God bless you all, and thank you. Thank you.
After the talk, they played the video of Celine Dion and Andre Bocelli singing The Prayer. That gorgeous song, right? Here are the first few words of the song as we strive to think like God, to see things the way God sees them. With the help of my screen reader,
I pray you will be our eyes.
I pray that you'll be our eyes.
And watch us where we go.
And watch us where we go. And help us to be wise.
In times when we don't know.
In times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer. As we go our way, lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe. I pray we'll find your light. That will do it for this week on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. If you are hearing this, if this all works, it means that when Beth hits publish, it does. And this is the message that's supposed to be here this week. I will see you next week. Again, if you have stories to share, your own encounters, please let me know by going to touchedbyheaven.net. You are the fuel for these podcasts, and I thank you for participating and listening. See you next time on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.